Can we all of us take our seats? I'll ask all of us to stand up as we welcome the Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa, Mr. David Mabuza, accompanied by ministers and Nkosikazi Umhlawuli as they come inside the hall. Welcome, Deputy President, and your entourage of ministers and Nkosikazi Umama Umhlawuli. Samukele nekumkani ezikhona amakhosi endabuko, amakhosi asendlunkulu akhona. Sizawucela bathathe isihlalo. While we are standing, can we start with the national anthem? Can we start with the national anthem? No, can you please get help from the sound system? May we be seated. Can we all be seated? On behalf of the Inter-Ministerial Committee on Land and Agriculture, chaired by the Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa, Deputy President David Mabuza, I would like to welcome you all in this summit. I would like to welcome the ministers who are here, members of the Inter-Ministerial Committee, who are hosting this summit with all of us. Firstly, I wish to profusely apologize to all of you for starting later than we had anticipated. We all appreciate that the matter of land is a very important one in our society, given the legacy of our history of dispossession. And as such, it actually invokes a lot of emotion, but also excitement, and an interest in wanting to engage. So we did have invited guests and other of our communities who also came, and they are invited as well, because all of us are here to discuss this most important matter. My name is Choko Didiza, the Minister of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development. I am your co-chair for today, chairing this session with Inkosikazi Bungonyama from the National House of Traditional Leaders and Kwesa. We will be steering this program with her, to make sure that it runs smoothly and we're able to come up with the solutions that we want. We have walked a long journey to be where we are today. This journey started a long time. Some of the members participated in the Land Summit of 2005, when we were trying to look as to what is it that we need to do to make sure that the land reform of our country addresses the issue of land inequality in our society. From that Land Summit, there were processes and engagements and dialogues that has always involved a number of our constituencies who are here today. We've all acknowledged that the legacy of our history did create a very uneven and unequal society. Even post the democratic government, we still remain with some of those unfortunate legacies, where in terms of our understanding and appreciation of tenure security of our citizens in terms of their land, there are still the tensions that arise as a result of the influences of laws of our colonizers, which are very Eurocentric, which clash with the tensions of indigenous law in our country. And these issues have created a challenge where, on one hand, in terms of the recordal of land rights in the statute through the deeds office, it would be those that relate to individual ownership, usufruct right, leasehold, as it's understood in terms of the Roman Dutch law. And a majority of our citizens who remained in what is commonly known during the time of setting up the 1913 Land Act are the reserves, or as it has later been known, as areas where communities and our traditional leaders stay in communal areas. Their dispensation was not accommodated in law. Other than that, they had the permission to occupy. So these are the issues that we have not actually finally concluded in ensuring that we have a broad policy framework that accommodates all our tenural system in the country. We also know the challenges of land hunger that still remain in these communities that were actually squashed in the reserve. Despite the restitution processes and other land reform programs, we still remain with that reality. That reality, both in policy and law, is what we need to address. Therefore, we are here today to deliberate on this important matter of land, not only confined to communal land tenure, because I know in the 2018 meeting, when COCTA and the National House convened a meeting, some of the issues that Amakosi raised related not only on the 13% of land, but also to say, how do we deal with the land hunger in our country? The other issue that also came up were issues of development, that communities and Amakosi in traditional areas felt as government and the various civil stakeholders, we need to engage on so that we can come up with solutions that seek to address those. Issues of planning, spatial planning in particular, the roles of Amakosi, roles of the local government, again were other issues that came up as matters of dialogue. There have been processes agreed to, some of which are going to be issues of the future from today in terms of how we work going forward in addressing some and a range of other matters. So I would like, in that note, to welcome all of you and say, ngesizulu namngelekile. There is still somebody, my co-chair, who is going to acknowledge you in your various capacities that you are here. So it wasn't because I do not recognize the importance and the different levels of who you are. Bekuvula nokucaba indlela. Uza kwethu ke uzawuza azothetha nani anamkele kakuhle njengeendwendwe zethu ubani ngobani nilapha njena. Atsho ke ukuze sazane ukuthi simi apha nje sikulendlu nje size kulo mcimbi singobani. Andinikele kuwe ke nkosikazi.
Good day, everyone. Mine is very easy. Ndingunkosikazi uNogoma Monyama from Abatem Bagadalingebo in the Eastern Cape. I'm the member of the National House of Traditional Leaders. I will first introduce the Deputy President, His Excellency David Mabuza. I will also introduce our kings and queens. In our midst, we have got King Simangaliso Ndamase, King of Amampondo, Asenyandeni, Zoviezwe. We have got Regent of Balobedu Principe, Mpampata Mujaji Kulube. Salwa Nomona. We have got Morena Emuhulu Mubedi, Obakwena Bamubedi in Free State, the home Morena. Morena Emuhulu Mubedi, Moda, Batwaba Moda, Free State, the home Morena. We have got the representatives of Hakame Kingship, Avulwandle. We have got the representatives of Abatem Bagadalingebo, Azulbanzi, the one and only my king. Representatives of Zulu Kingdom, Abantwana Basendlungu. Representatives of Abatem Basehoda, Adalivula. If there are any kings that I've missed, I would apologize, but this is the list that I was given. I will proceed and introduce the Chairperson of the National and Hoisan Leaders, Kosikazi Nosandi Mhlauli Anosandi, together with the Deputy Chairperson, Kosisi Atlulo Rapulana, and the entire members of the National House of Traditional and Hoisan Leaders. The ministers and deputy ministers are amongst us. Vakabiki, I'm coming. The premiers and the MPCs from various provinces. Representatives of the Presidential Advisory Panel. Select Committee on Agriculture, Land and Mineral Resources. The chairpersons of provincial houses of traditional leaders and Hoisan leaders and their deputies. Contralesa led by Jose Pilane, the deputy chairperson, the deputy president of Contralesa. Mayors from various districts, DGs, DTGs, HODs of various departments. South African Local Government Association, that is our SALCA. Commission of Khoisan Matters. Now we Mizile, Vuyanga Khoisan and San communities, distinguished guests, and members of civic and civic communities, and everyone that I've mentioned, you are all welcome. I thank you. Because of time, I know you know the excitement might want us to sing, but let us just hold those horses. The time might come. So let us urge everyone just to hold your horses of excitement. We are all excited to be here. Thank you. On that note, I would like to call upon our Minister for Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, Dr. Bosa Zanazuma. Can you come forward, ma'am? Thank you.
Thank you very much to the two program directors, Deputy President of the Republic, Excellency David Mabuza. If you don't mind, I will just stand on the protocol that has been established, because in the interest of time. Today we gather as a nation to bring to sharp focus the important matter of land and communal land in particular. The traditional leaders in their meeting in 2018 reminded us that all our injustices and oppression started with and will end with the land. Therefore, today we give attention to the land question. However, as the Department of Southern African Agrarian Reform scholar, Professor Moyo, so often used to remind us, and I quote, land reform is a fundamental dimension of the agrarian question. Whilst the agrarian question is a fundamental dimension of the national question. I raise this because it seems that when we engage the land, sometimes we separate from the national question. The land and the national question are also intrinsically linked to the agrarian question and to the large extent identity, development, and livelihoods. Thus, despite the welcoming hands offered by the native people to the crew of Bartholomew Dias in February 1488 on the shore of what is now known as Mossel Bay, the white master sought to replicate on our shores what they had started in India and elsewhere. With practice, they understood that they had to tamper with the identity and heritage of the African, in which land played a central role. It was President O.R. Tambo who reminded us that prior to the colonial masters coming, and I quote him, the land on which the cattle grazed was communal property. It was owned by no one. It was nobody's private farm. It was the common property of the people, shared by the people. So the practice of sharing was central to the concept of ownership of property, close quote. Thus, the preoccupation of the settler was to destabilize or destroy the very essence of the African life identity, governance, including institutions of traditional leadership. Therefore, the Freedom Charter recognizes that our people have been robbed of their birthright to land, liberty and peace by a form of government founded on injustice and inequality. This was achieved through the wholesale dispossession of land and cattle, through various wars, battles and taxes, with the ultimate result of challenging the dignity of our people. I trace this history because I believe it to be important in shaping our dialogue over the next 2 days. Before we can explore what are appropriate instruments and tactics, we must first understand how and why the land question arose in the first place. We must understand how we got here in the first place. Of course, the initial Europeans made sure that they forced our people through wars and taxes to go and work because they had to get cheap labor to support the growth and sustenance of the colonial and white enterprise. Having succeeded in suppressing the African, the settlers utilized their stolen economic base to support the further industrialization of the colonial capitals. This meant minimum industrialization of our continent. However, in South Africa, the settler state made our land their home and even developed their own languages. Thus, the term colonialism of a special type. However, their allegiance remained Western orientated. Thus, the entire production, logistics and transportation system was and continues to be geared towards supporting the colonial capitals, even around the movement of mineral resources to the ports. This was to enable ease of movement to the colonial capitals. Even when aviation came into existence, its orientation was towards the Western capitals. With the accumulation of land, not only what land, but also what is below it, and what is above it, and what watered it, the colonial project was complete. It therefore means our liberation cannot be entirely realized until the land and what is below it, above it, and what waters it is in the control and command of the majority. As we have said, South Africa belongs to all who live in it. So the economy must belong to all who live in it, the land must belong to all who live in it. When one passes away, we return to the earth. So the land has a spiritual and a cultural connection. It is also where we build our homes, institutions, offices, roads, railways, dams, and any other infrastructure. The land is the main source of our food, therefore our nutrition, prosperity, as it supports our flora and fauna, as well as our businesses, factories, agriculture, mines. It is also connected to our waterways, the rivers, the dams, the lakes, as well as our oceans and seas. Even when we want to take to the skies or to space, we must start and end on the land. Consequently, today's landmark discussion is most important and significant because the aspirations of the people cannot be met without the land. In remembering the quote of President Tambo, we've referred to earlier, we see these next 2 days as an important step towards returning to ourselves and the African essence. As we return to our essence, we must also heed the call of the Freedom Charter, which says, quote, "The land shall be shared amongst those who work it." and that the states must help the peasants with implements, these tractor stamps, and save the soil. Thus, it is our sincere hope that we will use these 2 days to chart the journey towards those and other objectives. Of course, we as a government will look to you to discuss and to come to some consensus. As we do that, we should seek to unite the continent, for we have a common history and a shared destiny. If we were to put, or somebody on Africa Day sent me something interesting. He said if we were to put a wall around Africa, a lot of countries somewhere else would run out of business. That was just something sent on Africa Day, but I'm not advocating for that. Program Director, let me now introduce our Deputy President. I don't think he needs really introduction. He has met with many of the traditional leaders, he's met with many of the kings and many of our communities. So, before he was the Premier of Mpumalanga, so I don't think he needs much by way of introduction. Deputy President, the podium is yours. Thank you.
Program Director, thank you very much for the opportunity. Ministers and deputy ministers in our midst, the kings and queens that have graced this occasion, we feel very honored that you are amongst us today. The Chairperson of the House of Traditional and Question Leaders, Nkosikazi, the Deputy Chairperson of the National House of Traditional and Question Leaders, Khoshi Seto, members of the National House of Traditional and Question Leaders present here today, Premiers, MECs of Copta and Agriculture, Chairpersons of Houses of Traditional and Question Leaders, the President of Contralesa and the entire executive of Contralesa, mayors from all districts and metros, the leadership of the South African Local Government Association, representatives of the Presidential Advisory Panel on Land Reform, representatives of the academia, non-governmental organizations, our legal experts, business, and civil society, representatives of traditional and Khoisan communities, directors generals, our senior officials who are present here, and all delegates, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, I think we need to convey our sincere apology as government that we had to start this summit 2.5 hours late. We apologize for the inconvenience caused. I'm sure we'll attend to all the glitches. Tomorrow, our program should run very smooth. Our apology. Program Director, our gathering here today and tomorrow marks an important milestone in our efforts of resolving the national question of land and the quest to affirm our heritage founded on our rights to land as an important pillar for the realization of development. Land, heritage, and national identity are inseparable as they define how we perceive ourselves as a people, as a sovereign nation with uncontested rights to self-determination. The national land spaces of our birth define ecosystems of life, our collective consciousness, our nationhood, and the possibilities of future progress that any nation, including our nation, desires for its own people. The nation lives because it has land. The native people of the land live because they define themselves in relation to the land they inhabit for their development and progress. Even the powerless and the poor are born into land that must define their identities and provide sustenance to them and their generations to come. Therefore, it goes without saying that the lives of communities are intertwined with land and its natural endowments that must benefit them. Individually and collectively, as a community of people, must have access to land for their development and progress. As we gather today in this summit, our reflection must not escape the inevitable constitutional injunctions that land administration and tenure systems that we opt for must primarily put the interests of the people and communities first. In traditional communities, ownership and access to land for productive use will forever remain critical levers for addressing the legacies of underdevelopment and social deprivation. We have no doubt that traditional leaders gathered here today understand and appreciate the value of land in helping to advance the empowerment of the people in communal areas. For the people in communal areas have the same right to development as any other South African elsewhere in urban settings. Therefore, any form of land deprivation strips ordinary people of their national identity, their heritage, and ability to develop and progress as a people. As a nation, our struggle for liberation was primarily centered around the injustices of land dispossession and deprivation, and the indignity of forced removals of people from the land of their birth. In the broader struggles for liberation and democratization, traditional leaders played a critical role in the fight against land dispossession by the colonial and the apartheid system. Any narration of the history of land dispossession, wars in Africa and South Africa will be incomplete if it does not include the heroic struggles that were led by traditional leaders and Khoisan leaders. As we gather here, many years later, the land question remains firmly on the agenda of government's transformation program, and this has continued to feature strongly in our engagement with the institution of traditional and Khoisan leaders. As a nation, we are now at a point of no return. We have geared ourselves to confront the land question head-on by utilizing all constitutionally compliant instruments and mechanisms of transformation. We are at the crossroads, one possibly leading to anarchy and destruction, and the other leading to our carefully guided land reform program that ensures strategic land acquisition, land distribution, land restitution to its rightful owners and those who need it for development. While we accept that land reform is a complex matter and very emotive one, as a responsible government, we affirm our determination to choose the path of land reform rooted within the provisions of our Constitution. More importantly, land tenure reform remains a critical component of our land reform. Not only is accelerated land reform a necessary condition for the restorative justice, but it is a precondition for forging unity and social cohesion across the nation. Government is committed to ensuring that our land reform program delivers on the aspirations of our ordinary people. While the scope of our summit has been framed to cover land administration and tenure in communal areas, as government, we are aware of the urgent need to effect land transformation that goes beyond the 13% of communal land under the jurisdiction of traditional leaders. We will proceed with available policy and legislative instruments that will assist in the acquisition of more land for redistribution and expansion of communal land, especially in areas where land has been expropriated in the public interest. We will ensure that land issues not covered in the deliberation of this narrowly focused summit are firmly placed on the agenda of the Inter-Ministerial Task Team that is seized with addressing all issues that were raised by traditional and Khoisan leaders. We are encouraged that on the occasion of the indigenous and traditional Indaba in 2018, traditional leaders reaffirmed their commitment to, among others, the implementation of land tenure reforms and land redistribution within a developmental approach. The Indaba also agreed that the summit will be convened to interrogate the transfer of land and its transformation. Within the spirit of that resolve, This summit will focus on how we collectively shape the nature of land administration and tenure in communal areas, including governance, institutional coordination mechanisms, and the role of traditional leaders. The proposals discussed and agreed in this summit will help shape and redefine into clear policy instruments to advance land administration and tenure reforms in our country. As we undertake this work, we must rethink the developmental dichotomy that perceives and circumscribes communal land for only human settlements and labor reserves, while urban areas and small towns are seen as the sites of industrial development and job creation. Instead, communal land administration and tenure must be geared to position strategic communal land for targeted industrial development in key sectors of comparative advantage. Within the framework of the district development model, infrastructure to support key sectors, value chains must be developed to concentrate value creation and employment opportunities in close proximity to where people live. Given the predictability of communal land administration and tenure, there is no doubt that traditional communities could develop into thriving sites of targeted industrial development and beneficiations of available natural endowments. With proper governance systems and processes, the people in communal areas stand to benefit and improve their lives through the productive utilization of their land. Program Director, essentially, effective development and utilization of communal land must be guided by long-term spatial development perspectives depending on comparative advantage of each area. Economic development corridors and designated human settlement areas must be based on the spatial development priorities that contributes to the long-term development trajectory of a given district or a given local municipality. Spatial and land use planning also guides infrastructure investment to support economic mobility and access to basic services and social amenities. The current approach in the development and growth of settlements in communal land is untenable and unsustainable. The ad hoc allocation of land and development without services makes the provision of basic services difficult, and in some instances do not factor in the challenges that may be posed by global warming and climate change resulting into natural disasters. This problem could be easily resolved through the closer collaboration between municipalities and our traditional leaders. Traditional leaders can make a significant contribution towards promoting responsible land use planning and development, drawing from indigenous knowledge systems that have, from time immemorial, guided the development of our traditional communities. We are aware that traditional leaders have raised their concerns about the implementation of the Spatial Planning and Land Use Management Act. Traditional leaders felt that they were not consulted for input, yet spatial planning happens in their areas of jurisdiction. There are best practices which they would like government to consider so that they have an effective role to play in the development of their areas. This summit has to find a workable solution and an approach to the institutionalization and implementation of SPLUMA so that we ensure that traditional leaders also play an effective role in the special development planning affecting communal land. Program Director, like we have mentioned earlier, this summit have a singular focus on tackling complex issues of communal land, administration and tenure. As government, we have taken a position that the state divests itself of ownership of this land and transfer it to its rightful owners. Questions that the summit must deliberate extensively on is how communal land should be administered and what different form of tenure will be appropriate and consistent with the customary norms and practices of these different communities. Our approach as government has been that some preparatory work needed to be done before this summit could be convened. That is why in the build-up to this summit, we had to undertake study tours, we had to undertake research to benchmark our approach with other countries. On the basis of the study tours and desktop analysis reports, a draft position on land administration and tenure reform in communal areas was developed, followed by a nationwide consultation processes with relevant stakeholders. We must thank all deputy ministers who undertook this consultation process, though very strenuous, but they were able to complete it. To our deputy ministers, thank you very much. Deputy Minister Squasha, Deputy Minister Bapela, John Jeffries, and all of you, thank you very much. These consultations were held with the National House of Traditional and Khoisan Leaders, as well as the various provincial houses of traditional and Khoisan leaders, the Congress of Traditional Leaders of South Africa, the National Khoisan Council, traditional communities, academia, and civil society. The purpose of this consultation was to ensure that traditional leaders contribute to coming up with an appropriate policy framework to address issues of land administration and land tenure in communal areas. We believe that insights gleaned from the research, the study tours and stakeholder consultation can be brought to bear on this summit's deliberation and can indeed help to enrich discussions and proposals. We say all these things conscious of the fact that the issues that require our attention in this summit are quite complex and at times emotive as well. However, we are equally confident that through putting our heads together, we'll find common ground on what will ultimately be the best interests of our communities. It is expected that the summit will emerge with recommendations on national policy and legislative framework for land administration and tenure reform in communal areas, with a long-term goal of advancing socio-economic development in our rural areas. In addressing land matters, we cannot forget about the Khoisan people, who were also dispossessed of land in their earlier centuries. It was encouraging to hear that they were also consulted and will be allowed to make contribution in this summit on how government should address issues of Khoisan communities. There is no doubt that there is more that we need to deliberate on even beyond this summit, including the important matter of socio-economic development of traditional communities. That is why on the 2nd of February 2022, the President established the Inter-Ministerial Task Team on Traditional Leadership. As a task team, we have already had a dialogue with traditional leadership. We have established work streams to focus on specific issues of concern. We are pleased with the progress made by the work streams in resolving some of the outstanding issues that were raised by traditional leaders. The speed with which we have dealt with matters of concerns around communal land tenure may have taken longer than we all would have anticipated. This is as a result of the realities of our history and the nature of our governance architecture. As government, will not tire in pushing ahead with addressing issues of land reform and agrarian reform. We are committed to ensuring that the outcomes of this summit assist us in addressing the issues of communal land administration and land tenure in our rural communities. We wish this summit very well in the deliberation that are going to happen in this summit. We are waiting for the outcomes of this summit. Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right, that was Deputy President David Mabuza speaking at the Communal Land Administration and Tenure Summit, which is taking place today and tomorrow, talking about the importance of development in those areas, even talking about industrialization on communal land and the importance of spatial planning such that communities are able to travel more easily to economic opportunities, and a whole lot more, saying that the conclusions of that summit will help to inform government policy about the way forward. And so
a lot has been said. I want to believe in the Obana song. We are preparing now our minds as to how we are taking this process further. Following our program, because of time constraints, we're not going to be standing from time to time as co-program directors. We'll be calling the following people: the Deputy Minister Uspacha to come and reflect on the position of government on the tenure reform in communal land. He will be followed by the Chairperson of the National House of Traditional Leaders and Hoi, San Leaders. The DP in his speech mentioned not once the word traditional leaders. She will be going to reflect on the position of royalty in as far as the issue of land is concerned. The Chairperson of the National House will then be followed by our organization, Contralesa, who will reiterate our position as royalty in as far as this issue is concerned. Hosipilane will take us through that. We therefore hope that as they address us, their reflections will not contradict each other. The issues of two bulls in one kraal, the laws created will not result to community fightings. So siyacela ke singazoxatyaniswa kweholo. Iza ke umntana Sikhwatsha.
It's definitely not me. Program Director funeka siqabane sizovana. Yes. You know, government programs are so formal. I feel like saying, Mabawike. Thank you very much. I hope I've not violated anything. Honorable Program Directors, Minister Titiza, Gosibonyama, His Excellency, the Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa, Minister of Culture, Minister Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, the Chair of the House of Traditional Leaders, Mamuhlawi, the Deputy President of Contralesa, DB Bilane, ikumkani zezwela kowethu ngokubanzi ezikhoyo apha, premiers present and absent, MECs, mayors, the leadership of SAGA, community members in communal areas, NGOs, community-based organizations, the panel as established by the President, the Mutlante Commission, land activists, directors general, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed, I hope I did acknowledge all our ministers and deputy ministers present here. It is indeed a watershed moment as we stand on this podium. We might take it very light, but today, history is being made in our country. Deputy President, as you were indicating, the dispossession of the koi and the sand, you heard the humiliations of a people who were deprived of their dignity, I would like, in my brief address, to start by repeating a quote I once made some years ago during a budget speech. It comes from the memoirs of Paul Kruger. Just to recap what happened then. And I invite this House and the podium to imagine a battlefield situation. He narrates a situation as some commandos were about to dispossess what they called the natives of their land and livestock. And journey with me as I quote Paul Kruger. He says, "We held a council of war in which it was decided that the beggars of the South African Republic should receive farms in the territory which was now about to be freed from the Kafirs, from the enemy, and hold them under the laws of the Orange Free State. An attack was made in the Malap Mountains. The enemy was driven off, and a large number of his men killed and wounded. A quantity of cattle captured. When we had succeeded in capturing the cattle, we counted no less than 8,000 head. We managed to capture another 30,000 sheep, 8,000 oxen, and a few hundred horses, quote unquote. Just this quotation should really be able to take you into the battlefield then. We stand here, Honorable Deputy President, on the shoulders of brave men and women, the kings, the traditional leaders of our country, who faced this brutal enemy. We stand on the shoulders of Adam Gok, Shaka Tegayo Makoma, Sabata Taliye, Damasa Stawa Matosa, Sekukune Bambata, Mushweshwa Makato Kukunyana, Langalbalele, and many, many others. Today, a government that you lead, Deputy President, says never, never, and never again shall it be that this land is not given back to its own people. Just this one example of what happened in that specific battle tells the story of how some of our forefathers were dispossessed of their land. This type of aggression by the colonizers against the indigenous inhabitants is what led to all the wars of resistance. Others call them frontier wars and so forth. We can mention many and many, many heroes and heroines. As I stand in front of you today, King Hintsa's head is not in South Africa, but his body is here in Gauteng. And we are indigenous African people. You can say more than me what that means. I am trying to describe the historical context and seriousness of the issues around this that our Deputy President called an emotive issue on the issue of the land. Having said the above, the purpose of this summit is to make us able to spell out how we, together as a nation, take the process forward. Program Director, I am not going to waste time. Part of what I was going to say has been reflected by the Deputy President around the statutories. As government started acknowledging our colonial and apartheid past, that reality of landlessness and race-based special patterns have been stubborn, very stubborn to dismantle. About 17 million people in communal land areas hold unregistered informal rights, whilst more than 2 million farm dwellers in commercial farms live in constant fear of evictions. Our constitution, which was adopted by our parliament in 1996, declared that South Africa belongs to all. It's not me. Our constitution, which was adopted in 1996, declares that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, united in our diversity. In that preamble of this constitution, you will find the DNA of all those of our people who gathered in 1955. The preamble says it all. The Constitution further enjoins us to improve the quality of life of all citizens and free the potential of each person. And it assures us that every citizen is equally protected by law. The Constitution gave us a legally binding framework to address the apartheid practices, which deprive people their rights and give the state the responsibility of ensuring that a person or community's security of tenure is legally insecure as a result of past racially discriminating laws or practices is entitled, to the extent provided by an act of parliament, either to tenure which is legally secure or to comparable redress, quote unquote. In 1997, the white paper on land policy was drafted and published. It provides the policy perspective with regards to tenure reform in South Africa. It stipulates that tenure reform must move towards rights and away from payments. It also stipulates that tenure reform must allow people to choose the tenure system which is appropriate to their circumstances. New tenure systems and laws should be brought in line with reality as it exists on the ground and in practice. In our country, communal land is governed by various pieces of legislation. Some of these were enacted before the new democratic dispensation, and others are relatively new. Among these, we can count Restitution of Land Rights Act 22 of 1994, Land Administration Act of 1995, the Land Reform Labour Tenants Act 3 of 1996, ESTA of 1997, Transformation of Certain Rural Areas Act Tranca 94 of 1998, the Communal Property Association Act. I know this is going to be part of a very, very robust discussion and debate in this. Honorable Chair, having said all that which is reflected above, as attempts to address the administration of land in the communal space, the reality is that South Africa has a dual land administration system. On the one hand, we have a secure tenure system supported by cadastry where the land is surveyed and registered. On the other hand, we have the insecure system where land is registered in the name of the state or remains unregistered and largely administered by traditional leaders. After consideration of the report of the Presidential Advisory Panel on Land Reform, which was appointed by President Ramaphosa in 2018, the IMC got into being to come up with recommendations on the gaps identified during their consultation process with stakeholders with regards to the implementation of land reform programs. After the recommendations were considered by the IMC decided that for it to consider the matter of communal land administration and tenure, a study tour which the Deputy President has spoken about should be undertaken. Objectives were to learn and share experiences, to learn more about the role of government, to also consider the spatial land use management and the role of traditional leaders. In 2019, His Excellency President Ramaphosa appointed the IMC on land, which is led and chaired by the Deputy President. The IMC directed that the study tours be undertaken. On the 3rd of March 2021, the IMC presented to Cabinet a draft position paper on land administration and land tenure in communal areas. Cabinet approved the draft position paper. Cabinet further directed the IMC to conduct consultations with stakeholders. Further, Cabinet directed the IMC to present to Cabinet proposals that emanate from stakeholders' consultations prior to Communal Land Tenure Summit. Consultations were conducted from the 1st of April 2021 to the 19th of April 2022 on the approved Cabinet position paper. Central to the discussion that this conference will grapple with is how to do that which the White Paper of 1997 said we should do. That is to talk about how to move away from permits to rights in land, how to move away from insecure land tenure to secure land tenure. How should land development in communal areas be managed? The following is government's pre-proposal position as I conclude on various aspects that we presented during the public consultations. In areas with traditional councils, we referred to outer boundaries, and we said we propose that communally owned areas be transferred to traditional council as established in terms of Section 16 of Act 3 of 2019 on behalf of the community or any other mechanism that might be agreed upon. Legislation should be created, a condition of title be created that both the outer boundary and internal boundaries be transferred simultaneously. Land administration ownership be vested in the community, and the land administration will vest with traditional councils. Where other mechanisms that might be agreed upon exist, the ownership will vest in the community and land administration will vest with the land community or existing structure. Areas without traditional councils on outer boundaries, the outer boundaries which would be communally owned areas to be transferred to the community in its own name. On land administration, we say land ownership will vest with the community and land administration will vest with the land administration committee or an existing structure. On internal boundaries, that is be subdivided and transferred to individual persons, families, households in their individual capacity, and title deeds, stroke certificate of customary land tenure right to be issued. To guiding principles with respect to decision making on communal land, there should be no dealing with outer boundary without the consent of the majority of members of the community. Commercial land should be subject to long-term leases with an option for renewal. The transfer of internal boundaries should be subject to condition of right of first refusal in favor of the community of that particular area. No dealing with the individual person's family households' rights without their consent. Communal land should be transferred to South African citizens only. Mortgaging of land should be limited to development of land for education purposes. Should develop a model for beneficiary system that benefits the communities. A trust account on behalf of the community should be created for the community development projects. A process should be developed by relevant departments on how the affected communities can benefit from the relevant projects. We must ensure accountability from the structures that administer the land on behalf of the community. Responsibilities of the state. The state should establish a land administration board, should establish a recordial and registration office, should develop a national land information system, should develop a land administration legislative framework, should develop land tenure legislation. The state should review SPLUMA, Deeds Registry Act and Land Sale Regulations. Chairperson, I am concluding. During the consultation process, we received verbal and written inputs from various stakeholders, which were consolidated into a report which was presented to the IMC. And these will be part of your deliberations today and tomorrow in commissions. In conclusion, land is an asset. Without land, there will be no food. Without land, there will be no houses. Without land, there will be no infrastructure. Without land, there will be no work. And without land, there will be no graves. Land is our beginning and our end. We cannot even practice our customs without land. Land is the cornerstone of anything and everything. While land matters are emotional, in this summit we have to agree and disagree for a common cause of ensuring that persons or households staying in the communal communities have legally secured tenure. Let me take this opportunity, Program Director, to indicate that way beyond this particular summit, government has intentions of, as a courtesy, of convening a meeting with all our kings in the country to go back to them and report that we had this particular summit as a matter of courtesy to inform them as the moral leaders of our nation. Let me take this opportunity, Program Director, to thank the IMC, Deputy President, our three Deputy Ministers, Minister Titiza, Minister Moshoka Zuma, Minister Ronald Lamola, who really threw us into the pool and said, swim and see how you get across the river. I am sure that we did not come out of this process dry as we were when we entered the pool. It was a difficult, challenging process. I'm looking at the chairperson of one session in KZN, and I have vivid memories of that particular day. I was not sure how we're going to handle it, but here we are. I am smiling, he is smiling. And that is the nature, how unique the South African people can be. I want to close. I know that the minister has really made the coach. She really took me by surprise because I had prepared this book and I like it. I'm going to repeat it as I go to sit down. It is by none other than that giant African revolutionary, President General Oliver Tambo. And I repeat it, I say, he says, not me. The land on which the cattle grazed was a communal property. It was owned by no one. It was nobody's private farm. It was a common property of the people, shared by the people. So the practice of sharing was central to the concept of ownership of property, quote unquote. I thank you very much.
Program directors ababheki esibaleni kuwe namhlanje malibongwe mongameli welizwe zikumkanise ilizwe lakokwethu ezinye zikhona ngokwazo kumkani indlovu abameli bekumkani nomkhulu Mota Mobedi, all representatives from the kingdoms, amakhosi wonke, led by provincial chairpersons and deputies, ministers, Wokundola Sanjay, co-MC leadership, farmers, interested groups, see family, parties, we are here as a family. Let me say, Deputy President, sijikeleza from 2017. Sijikeleza lendaba. Saze safika. Ayisijikelezile indaba ayijikelezwa ngabo bantu ke babejikeleza indaba. Before proceeding with my speech, let's remember those who have been with us when we started this road, including our chairperson, Unzumza Osmahla. The baton was given to the National House of Traditional and Equestrian Leaders in 2017, given by the previous house to him. Now we are towards the end of this term. Since we have been given the baton, and that must have so figure. But let me appreciate support from Mama Host and other partners who have been working with us. This is an achievement to us as this house, the current house, although it is coming to an end more June. This is an achievement to have this summit. But I'm not sure whether the resolutions taken today will be called grandchildren of the resolutions, abazulwana the resolutions. I don't know. No answer is doing because you have the resolutions, and then you people come back after a time. You people have resolutions. Abazulwana the resolutions. Nobody don't know what we're dealing with now. But let's do away with abazulwana the resolutions. There must not be grandchildren of resolutions. Let's implement what we have agreed on. DP, you have said it all. The road to this summit. But you can't talk about land without talking about culture. Land and culture are not chicken pieces where you get this one there and that one there. They go together. We don't take away culture. So when talking about the communities there, look at their culture. Can't separate them. The summit is held 5 years after the Indaba was held in 2017. The resolutions taken in 2017 and circulated to all government departments have not been implemented, even 20% of them. I'm actually don't unpick this. I 20% speaking. Traditional leaders and their communities continue to support and work with government through feeling left behind on a number of issues. Traditional communities under the leadership of traditional leaders fought for their land. Blood and speech. Land is just not a status to the institution of traditional leadership, but something that we identify with. We have attachments and spiritual belonging to the land. Land was governed by our customary law, which was made subordinate to colonial laws. The colonialists subjected our laws to their and forcefully to their own ideas. 28 years later, of no land restored to the people. Yet the struggle was about reclaiming freedom and land. No economic activities happening without having land. Government is aware that the creation of structures such as trusts, CPAs, etc. is but a means of removing traditional leaders from their people, and that is succeeding in other areas. When talking about CPAs here, we need also to reflect on lessons learned. When moving forward, we must say lessons learned. Because you'll find that sometimes the alternate is there and there when talking about the CPAs. Program Director, coming to land tenure, the time for our people to enjoy being part of free South Africa is when they can freely own and be guaranteed that no one will take their land. Traditionally, it has resolved that permission to occupy should be improved and given legal power and protection as a tenure system for communal land. PTO is the start, which we must ensure that our people are protected and they use the land to develop and build a future for themselves. We don't believe that we have to change the way they are living for them to develop them. Develop them as they are, but improve on what's supposed to be improved. The summit must objectively engage and agree on the kind of tenure system that will protect our communities and guarantee their tenure within the customary tenure system. The system must ensure that it seriously discussed also 87%, as indicated. That is outside 30%, and how communities benefit from it. The Gauteng Province is experiencing some sinkholes we know which are caused by mines that took the wealth underneath and left us with land that sits. What did we benefit other than communities are hungry and were forced into a dry area, yet fertile land is being sold to non-Africans, irrespective of their color. Coming to spatial planning, SPLUMA is a good piece of legislation, but badly drafted. Planning is good it's a good tool for such development. Hence, Investment speaks of proper planning and execution. But if government is giving powers to municipal officials to do as they wish in the land, it will not happen. A traditional council is managing the land on behalf of communities. The sector is still saying, listen to suggestions of the sector. Work with us, amend SPLUMA, then sit back and watch collaboration and development in areas of traditional communities. Traditional communities have developed themselves in making their own economic opportunities, only if supported. Support us and see our communities changing their own economic conditions. Invest Rural is a strategy we have to develop as our traditional leaders, making sure that we see our communities developing. Invest Rural is a 20 to 30-year strategy developed by traditional leaders for traditional leaders and their communities. Invest Rural is formed by the role taken by traditional leaders that will lead development in their areas. The approach is called developmental monarchs. Invest Rural has identified about 13 programs that will be implemented. Change will not only be seen, but unemployment, hunger, and lack will be this history in the books of South Africa. We request support from private sector, government, and other partners. We will continue to work towards emancipation of our communities from poverty, etc. In conclusion, Program Director, we know that there are people who are holding our land, keeping our land safe, but we are conscious that sometimes you can ask a goat to look after your cabbage. That will depend. Really, if you ask a goat, please goat, look at this cabbage. Kuzabonakala ukuthi cabbage yofika lisekhona na. As we are here in this conference, we have got interests ezohlukene here. Abantu abafana beze apha. Uyazazi umuntu uzeleni la. Others are here to protect their eggs. Amaqanda wabo basingawanyatheli. Protecting their eggs that we cannot tramp on them. Kwezafama bazithathile bazenze zabo. Abanye are here honestly for the development of communities. Others are here, they don't even know why they are here. The reason I'm saying this, I'm not undermining anyone. There is a mischief here. When communities are busted, thina ke singabafazi ndizothi siyahlala nomuntu usuka phina sizamfazi sihlala wena mfazi uphuma phi hayi ngiphuma esikisiki hayi ngiphuma ngapha emqandulu kuthiwa into ndilo size kuyo hey nami andiyazi bekuthiwa nje masikhwele ebhasini. But even those who are here today, coming out of this conference, let's make them understand what we are talking about. We are talking about the land. We are talking about life of South Africa. And remembering that COVID has taught us lessons. Kukhona abantu ababheka iziqu zabo. Kukhona abantu abajoga communities. Kukhona child-headed families. Kukhona people living with disabilities. I'm here representing the House of Traditional and Khoisan leaders. The Khoisan community, they started singing their national anthem. I heard them singing. Yes. Now I saw nothing wrong there. Nothing wrong there. They were showing that they are asking part yabo nabe ingene phambi national anthem. There must be something actual in the language yabo national anthem. That is what I picked up. Let's take these things sometimes positively. They've indicated that they've got their own national anthem. They can sing here. But I advise them, which know, you can't sing the whole national anthem because we are here in South Africa. nani kufanele ifakwe angicele phambi kwebafuna anele constitution ifakwe istanza sabo phaya that talks to them. So wishing you all the best. Masiphuma apha sibuyele emakhaya. Let's know that we are here for the communities. Let's report back. So who's up now when you report back? Report to your communities. Siyabonga.
Deputy President David Mabuza, our Majesties, our Kings and Queens, Ministers and Deputy Ministers, Chairpersons of Provincial Houses, Chairperson of National House of Traditional and Peasant Leaders, and your Deputy, and members of the House, leadership of provincial houses, leadership of Contralesa and members, leadership of Coesan and members, mayors and MECs, community representatives, and all protocol observed in the interest of time. I think after listening from all these honorable speakers, I'm forced to look into deleting some of my presentation because we will be repeating some of the matters. There is some kind of congruence, except that we need to clarify and re-emphasize others that they have not touched on. From the point of Contralesa, we are expecting our government to redress the dispossessed that we experienced during apartheid by returning the land to the rightful owners, which are traditional authorities and their communities. We have always been told about the insecurity of tenure in a communal land or communal ownership. And when we do some research, we found that some of the scholars have somehow, and these are progressive ones, they equate the land tenure or ownership in the communal land as similar to sectional title deed, because the similarity with the sectional title deed is because the people own the land or they own the surface, but they share all amenities within a particular area. They share the security system, they share almost everything, they share culture. So this is somehow similar, and I think the only difference is our kind of tenure is not registrable. Our PTOs and all that is not registrable, and I think the best approach is to come up with a solution of how we could register it, not to restart everything from the beginning or cancel what is already existing. We are disposed by people of, we were disposed by the people of European origin through brutal battles and genocidal wars that were meted against us as African people. And hundreds of thousands of our forebears were killed trying to defend the land from the colonizers. This country as a whole, according to us, belongs to the African majority. We don't subscribe to the fact that the land belongs to everyone, because some are not really Africans, and they only came here to dispossess us our land. If you go to China, the land there is owned by the Chinese. You go to India, the land is owned by the Indians. Yes. And so forth to all other countries. But it is only our country where we allow everybody, to an extent that as we speak, some of our land are owned by foreigners, and they have gone into very extent in buying this land. So we need to really reconsider that, and it can only happen once the land has been restored to our rightful owners. We have, on several instances or conferences or summit, which has been elaborated by the previous speakers, where there were agreement and commitment with the current president, for that matter, where there were even time frames for the transfer of the land that is held by the rural communities. It's occupied, held by the rural communities, but it's still registered in somebody else. And unfortunately, it's our minister, who I think is perpetuating the issues of the apartheid, because those come from the apartheid. And it will not be correct that we continue with that arrangement when we can change it as the new democratic country. So from our point of view as Contralesa and the communities we represent, we feel it has long been up for our government to restore and return those land to our communities and the traditional authorities. Our belief, Deputy President, as the chair of the interim ITMM, we feel that before we can talk of any liberation, we need to talk of the land and resolve the issue of the land. The national revolution was about the return of our land and freedom and the independence. Therefore, freedom and independence cannot be there without the return of the land to the rightful owners. Yes. Wow. There cannot be any justice without the restoration of the land. There cannot be any peace without the return of the land, with the wealth, which is the wealth of our communities. Yes. We don't see any stability without the restoration and the custodianship of the land to the institution of our traditional leadership and their communities over the landmass of this country. Communal land we are talking about is less than 5%. I hear we're talking about 13%, but the land that is in the hands of traditional communities, it's less than 5%. And it is the problem that we overlook the other bigger chunk of the land. We could actually be talking, we should be talking about the other land that is not in our traditional leadership and communities. What is disturbing is always when we talk about the communal land, you find many people who are not necessarily even staying in those lands, who have never even experienced the life that we are living in our land. And unfortunately, even our own government, when they want to get advice, they go and get advice from people who do not have the sense and understanding of what is happening in our land. And we are the people who are suffering, who know exactly and who experience the situation in the rural communities. We are therefore requesting our government to return the land to its rightful owners. The process should be the return of the land that is already in the hands of our communal communities. And only then we can discuss as to how it needs to be governed and managed. Because we have our own well-established processes of governance of this land, and that is why we managed to retain it despite all these challenges that we've gone through. We defended those lands. So it is really unimaginable that before we can be given our land that we hold, we have to go into so much stresses of going into advices by the people who are not necessarily understanding our situation. If government needs some advice, let us be the people who advise the government. We have also been told about the experience or the benchmarking that was done through or from other countries. We were not part of that. And those countries are not having a similar environment and situation that we are having. Even the land holding of those countries are not the same or similar to what we do. So we need to really engage before we take conclusions of those advices, deputy ministers, because otherwise we will be doing something that is not going to be sustainable. We want this to be a solution which is permanent, which can be progressive, and ensure that our communities are well developed. We've got cases within this same country, in the rural communities, where we could benchmark there, where there is a lot of progress achieved. And we are just ignoring and trying to go and copy things that are not necessarily familiar with us. So I think for our advice, we're saying let us engage properly and compare firstly or benchmark firstly with the existing environment in our country. So for anybody to talk of insecure land tenure in the rural communities, I don't think it's a proper analysis or interpretation. It's a misrepresentation, and we need to really come up honestly with that kind of approach. Otherwise, our position is that communal land is the only land that remains in the hands of Africans, smallest as it is. It is the corner that we are pushed and confined to. It is not only a piece of land that was stolen. Some communities had contributed to buy this land. And for information, some even had to buy the same land more than 3 times. And we have that proof. Now, you can imagine when people have bought their own land or were forced to buy their own land from this. And today, our own government now think it's not proper for the traditional leaders and their communities to determine their own fate. And they had to be directed or advised by somebody who actually, some of them contributed in this buying of our own land. Now, it cannot be acceptable that those kind of advices are only taken as is. We need to reflect properly on that. We currently, in our own country, we are regarded as people who don't own land. And these communities that bought land are similar to the Hasbrooks or the Van Ronde. Why do you come to the rural communities only when you leave the others who own private land? It doesn't make sense. Otherwise, we will then have to react the same way they are reacting and start to do our own oranges. And we don't want to get to that stage. Our position, therefore, is that all communal land currently occupied by the traditional communities be transferred to the traditional authorities and their communities as agreed with the president, the current president now, who was the deputy at that time, during the land summit. This will be a good start in the process of restoration of land to the African people. Government must also restore all successfully claimed land back to the original owners, being the traditional authority and their communities. It should not create another center of power in the same of the CPAs and other structures, unless the communities themselves decide on that. As this creates two centers of power within the same area or the same community, and it's disastrous, and it will unnecessarily create conflicts which will not be in the favor or something accepted. Contralesa totally reject the CPA and see them as instruments of colonial and apartheid regime. Especially where there is already existing and recognized authority. It can be understandable when it's where the people don't have already existing authority. But when there's authority, then why do you bring another authority? It's the cost of conflict. We are therefore, at the end, finally, Deputy President and Honorable Ministers, presenting this as a guideline and request that before any decision is taken, we need to iron out all these issues that we have identified as troublesome. And this will be a progressive move for the country and for the community to the upliftment and development of our rural communities. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy President of Contralesa, and all the speakers before him, Amshauli, Deputy Minister Skwaja. Very interesting presentations that have been made. We are in it, pakati. And that is what is nice, because this must be a dialogue. And perspectives are coming up, even though not quite different, because I think Deputy President has already indicated the position of government. But again, no squash away, because we need now to fine-tune. We still have got two speakers that are going to speak, but we know that we need to also assist the staff in the kitchen and yourselves, because you are hungry, you need energy in this debate. Without energy, the debate won't go as robust as it must be. So I want to propose that we now break for lunch, 45 minutes. I want to propose that as we go for lunch, we need to start to digest some of the inputs that have been made and indicate that our plenary discussion will not be long. We will have a few discussions, but we will actually have more thorough discussion in our commissions. Ministers, deputy ministers, MECs and premiers will have their lunch at Waterkloof Front. The King, Queens, and traditional leaders who are here. All of them will go to Wonderboom, and the delegates, all of us, because of the room and the size that's bigger, will go to Clover's Green and Serengeti. I just want to say that this is not done in discriminating one from the other, but it's more about the space and the accommodation so that all of us are able to go there. Can we take our seats while I allow the Deputy President and his entourage to leave the House for lunch, and we will then follow. I want to repeat so that those of you who have not picked it up well in the beginning, ministers, deputy ministers, MECs and premiers will go to Waterkloof. There's a room written Waterkloof. The king, queens and traditional leaders will go to Wonderboom, and the delegates from communities, civil society, government officials will go to Cloves, Green and Serengeti. Thank you very much. We will come back at 2:45.
Ladies and gentlemen, can you please leave the microphones and the receivers on the table?